What's happening, guys? Welcome to the Dynasty WarZone, the People's Dynasty podcast. On today's show, we're going to be talking about Dynasty ADP and players that we think are hits and players that we do think are misses. But I'll tell you who I miss, and that's my co-host, Jerry. Jerry's out one more week on vacation, but I have a very, very special guest and friend. My guest tonight is Mr. Dallas Hyder. Now, Dallas is on Twitter. He's at Salad Galore. Now, Dallas, spelled backwards, is salad with two L's. So at Salad Galore, Dallas is the host of the Rookie Rundown. He does a rookie-based show for us over at the Dynasty WarZone YouTube channel and podcast channel. He's also the owner of Dally Merch. Now, what is Dally Merch? We're going to find out in just a second. But let's talk to the man himself. Welcome back, Dallas. How you been, buddy?
Yeah, it's great to be on Player Profiler stream here. It's, thick of the rookie season for everyone that's listened to this. You obviously already know that statement there. But that's pretty much all I am known for and all I do year round, whether or not it is the current rookie class or the former rookie class. So I've already started kind of diving a little bit in the middle of basically doing some work over on the rookie rundown on some stuff. And some fun segments coming up in July. So it's been pretty busy, as you all know.
Yeah, so Dallas is a content provider for us. Again, he does YouTube and podcast for the Dynasty WarZone channel. Now, Dallas, real quick, man, give us the elevator speech. Give us the 60 to 90 seconds on Dally's merch and what is it?
Oh, yeah. So it's kind of on the whim, as most of you in
Dallas, you got a bit of a hang up on your mic. So you got like
Okay, 1 second. Let me try something.
Sure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give Dallas just a second to get his mic straightened out, and we're going to come back to Dallas. But while we have just a chance, we are going to do a word from the Podfather, and we're going to hear about the good friends of ours over at Underdog. So give me just 1 second.
Let's take a moment to talk about Underdog Fantasy. Now, many of you have already signed up. Thousands have signed up from Player Profiler already over the years. Underdog has supported us since 2020. Much of what you see on Player Profiler is because of Underdog, because of their support. Get the Underdog app, plug in that promo code Underworld. I used to play Underdog just for the best ball drafts. I mean, the best ball drafts are amazing. These draft rooms fill so quickly, and you can win life-changing money. You want to take advantage of all the sleepers we talk about on this show? Well, what better place than in an Underdog draft room to do that? And I recommend taking your Underdog play to the next level by diving into their NFL pick'ems. It's important to correlate those NFL pick'ems. You can pick both the quarterbacks and the wide receivers to exceed expectations. Correlate them, and you can 5x your payout. Bada bing, bada boom. Underdog Fantasy, the promo code is Underworld. For an instant deposit match up to $100, Underdog is the truest friend of the Underworld.
All right. Big shout out to our boy, the Podfather, and our friends at Underdog. Again, promo code Underworld. I do want to remind you, again, we are a 2-channel show. So if you're an audio consumer, podcast consumer, Dynasty WarZone on both Apple, Spotify, wherever you get that, you get Dynasty WarZone and Player Profiler. If you're a YouTube subscriber, Dynasty WarZone YouTube, Player Profiler YouTube. If you just subscribe 2 spots, regardless of how you consume, it really, really helps the show. Now, let's get back to Dallas. Let's get back to what's going on with Dally merch. All right, Dally, tell us a little bit about the merch.
All right, let's try this again. Can you hear me clearly?
Oh, dude, you sound like $1 million now.
Hey, I love it. There's something going on with my headphones right now that is not wanting to help my podcast game. So those are going to stay out for the time being, and we will dive into some Dally's merch as the question has now been asked twice. All right. So for all of you out there that do side hustles, that's kind of what I jumped into this year recently. Noticed a hole in the market for any of you anime fans out there and started trying to design some jerseys, anime merch in general for the fans out there, due to the fact that I could not find a Blue Lock jersey specifically anywhere on the internet that was not made out of rice paper. So went a different route, ended up making my own, and it kind of blew up overnight. Didn't really expect it to happen as quickly as it did. Just thought maybe I would get a little bit of beer money out of it. But I'm going to have to do a little tax write-off type of thing here pretty soon. So if anyone's interested in some Blue Lock anime specific gear, or some fantasy football gear, Memphis and I, with the Dynasty WarZone channel here on Fantasy, started putting out some other merch. Currently, there is still live a shirt and a hat with the Supreme-esque logo branding live on the website. It's an Etsy shop. It's based out of Kansas, where I live. And if anyone's interested in either one of those two things, that would be my suggestion. Just go give it a gander, if you will, to see if it's up your alley or not.
There you go. I'll link it in the show notes on both the YouTube and on the podcast version. Now, Dallas, let's get into it. You've done this with me before. You have done a round of good people, bad tweets. Now, Dallas, we got a real special one this time, and I brought this up for you because you like younger players. You're our rookie specialist, and here we go. This one is brought to us by Faithful to the Trey, and it's at Faithful Trey. And Faithful says, Watson, meaning Christian, is better than Chase, meaning Jahmyr. Yeah, I said it back in 2019, which is a long time ago. He was getting like 6 targets a game between Rodgers not having confidence after that first drop to injuries. He only played about 2/3 of the season. He was wide receiver 1 for weeks 10 through 14 in fantasy last year by Watson. Now, I'm going to get Dallas's take on the take here from Faithful Trey, but here was my take.
You know how fucking stupid you have to be to even think something like that, let alone say it publicly and act like you're fucking serious.
Yeah, that's mine. I mean, it's okay to think these things. You know, we all have these, car conversations with ourselves. At least I do. A lot of the ideas that I, come up with for the show, our new segment, it'll be coming up on YouTube later called Overtime. I've had thoughts like these, but never once did I think to myself, hey, self, I should say, Christian Watson's better than Jahmyr Chase. The Podfather just moved Jahmyr Chase to his 101 in a 1 QB. He has Chase ahead of Justin Jefferson, much less Christian Watson. Holy cow, Dallas. When you hear anyone say Christian Watson is better than Jahmyr Chase, what are your thoughts? And then since you're our rookie guy, why don't you give us your thoughts on Christian Watson as it relates to like a startup and then maybe amongst the rookie class, which you're coming off doing a lot of research on?
Yeah, I feel like I'm back playing T-ball again because as a Bears fan, I'm about to just bash this Green Bay player, and it feels really good to do. So just to get this out of the way, he is not better than Jahmyr Chase. Anyone that's saying that just didn't watch the two play. Christian Watson was always going to be a project coming in, and he got paired up with as it was mentioned in the comments, Hall of Fame quarterback that's no longer there, who is notorious for putting you in the doghouse if you don't know what you're doing. And that's kind of what we saw for a good portion of the season last year. They were forced to turn to Christian Watson in 2022 when Romeo Doubs, who was the target leader up until that point, got injured. Christian Watson finally was getting peppered with targets during that 4 to 8 week span that everyone likes to talk about. And you saw what potentially he could have as his ceiling. Segue into 2023. What are we dealing with right now? Not even remotely the same situation. We are seeing a guy in Jordan Love who, although some people are optimistic with based off of one game from last year, has been very tumultuous, both from just a play on the field standpoint and from where people have a tendency to rank him in Dynasty. So you have no longer a Hall of Fame quarterback going into 2023. You have Christian Watson, who, yes, had some flashes and was very productive for a small window, who still has not really eclipsed a season of what we saw from a guy who flamed out as quickly as he entered the scene, such as like a Kenny Golladay. When you're looking at his profile, he has the tools, but he's still very raw. His quarterback is not even remotely the same level that it was last year. So there's just a lot of factors that are going against him being ranked even where he is currently in Fantasy Pros ADP of, what would that put him at? Wide receiver 23 overall and 51 overall, ahead of guys on the level of Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, Brandon Ayuk, who had a similar, if not better, season last year. Treylon Burks, the hot stuff coming in for this coming up season as the target hog in Tennessee, knock on wood, if Nuke doesn't sign. So when you're looking overall, not even an argument at all between the two of Chase and Watson, but there's already a lot of question marks with the ADP in general of Christian Watson for me, especially because there are so many cliche mouths to feed in Green Bay with a lot of unknowns as to how the system is going to work without the Hall of Fame quarterback. So I'm out on him. I'm out on this take in general, and I will just bat it on back to you if you want to retort anything that I was saying there.
No, I think you did a tremendous job. Now, I do want to follow up with one more thing before I jump back in. Christian Watson amongst this rookie class, so I think the big three, I think the consensus, if we could agree right now at ADP, Jackson Smith and Jigba, the wide receiver one in this class. I think in 99.9% of my drafts, it's been Jordan Addison, number 2. And then you'd have, Quentin Johnston, number 3. I think that's been pretty chalk. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty standard with what you're dealing with. Occasionally you'll get some weird slip-ins where some people are really high on Zay Flowers, but that's about the only situation where usurps QJ as the wide receiver 3.
And some people are just really high. But where would you slip Watson in amongst those top 3? Would he be 1? Would he be ahead of Njigba? Where would he be for you as my go-to rookie guy?
Yeah. So as a prospect, this is kind of something that I do in general, just to make sure that I don't get take lock going into a season when I'm giving people information on rookies. I have a tendency to compare the last 2 classes with what I'm looking at right now. When you're looking specifically at him as a prospect, I would have had him at number 4 in this class, just behind QJ, but not really loving that now. If I see what I have seen on the field last year, those flashes, that's what we hope to see from a Quentin Johnston this year. So if he is currently at the Dynasty ADP of wide receiver 3 in the class, pretty much chalk, I would be sliding in a guy like Christian Watson 1 spot ahead of him and have him most likely as wide receiver 3 in this class.
Okay, fair, because Watson is going as wide receiver 18 off the board in Dynasty per Player Profiler's Dynasty ranks. You can get all those via the Dynasty Dominator. Pretty easy stuff. And you can go over there, check out the Dynasty Dominator. It's great for me, even as I'm hosting the show. Shout out to our new producer, Kevin, who's keeping us clean behind the scenes. But for me, it's super easy. I can just look right at it. So if you're looking for some good Dynasty rankings, it's worth what you pay. We're going to talk about some bad Dynasty ADP here in a bit. This is good Dynasty ADP. I agree. I like Christian Watson. I will say this about Green Bay. Jordan Love, not Aaron Rodgers. But I do like Mike LaFleur. Is it Mike? Yeah, Mike. Mike's the one in Green Bay. Matt was the one who got fired in New York with the Jets. So I do like the LaFleur offense. It feels like Walmart brand San Francisco. And I've seen bad quarterback play feed good wide receivers before, but I'm nervous. I'm a little bit nervous about what this offense will look like. Could it be really good? Sure. Could it be really bad? Absolutely. I think Watson's fine from a volume standpoint, but they did bring in, 2 tight ends in the 3rd round? I mean, 1 in the 2nd, 1 in the 3rd.
Yep.
And so they brought in more rookies. They brought in Romeo Dubes. They brought in Jaden Reed, who we all like. So it's very convoluted and packed there. And we're not sure who Jordan Love loves the most. So I agree. This is a horrible tweet. We know Ja'Marr Chase is the man. We've probably spent too much time on this tweet as it is, but we'll see what everybody thinks about Ja'Marr Chase at the 101. Let us know in the comments down below. He's the Podfather's 101 in a 1 QB startup league. For me, he's number 2. I'm still a Justin Jefferson guy. I still like that dome, but I get why the Podfather would have him there. So we're going to jump into it, Dally. We're going to talk about ADP hits and ADP misses. Now, what do we mean? Now, there's a lot of free ADP out there, and use it at your leisure. But for us, we went out there and kind of seen like when you search for good or bad, when you search Dynasty rankings, inevitably the first one that usually pops up is like a Fantasy Pros. If you're going to use free rankings, like if the Dynasty Dominator is just not in your budget right now, I would highly recommend Mike Clay's 240, but definitely consider the Dynasty Dominator because that's where the Player Profiler ranks are. But that becomes the consensus, Dallas. So when I brought you on, I told you a hit An ADP hit is someone who you would draft ahead of the quote-unquote consensus ADP. And a miss would be someone that you would not consider drafting anywhere near that ADP. So, Dallas, you understood the assignment, and you are the guest, so I'm going to give you the first swing at this thing. Who is a dynasty player at their current ADP that you think is a hit and you're going to have a lot of going into this dynasty season in 2023?
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of NFC North talk, I think, for a lot of people here from me tonight. But this one is kind of laughable to me, and especially with how often, both because we're talking about ADP, it comes into conversation when you talk about the productive struggle, winning year one in a dynasty startup, that type of mindset that so many in the dynasty space walk into drafts thinking they're going to do. The fact that we are allowing Adam Thielen to go as wide receiver 64 off the board currently, according to Fantasy Pros ADP and PPR scoring, is pretty wild to me. It just doesn't make sense, specifically due to the fact of just the single word of targets. When you're looking at Adam Thielen as a wide receiver prospect, yeah, he's aging, but targets just lift all sinking boats, basically, as rising tides do. I think that's the saying, something like that. But currently, Adam Thielen on the Carolina Panthers, moving over from Minnesota in this offseason, has more career receptions and touchdowns than the next 5 team targets combined on the team. So there's a lot of hopium happening right now when it comes to the likes of DJ Chark breaking out like he did in his sophomore season. The emergence of a guy like Terrace Marshall, who really has not shown anything up to this point other than 1 to 2 flashy catches in the NFL, as well as the second round rookie phenom that came out of absolutely nowhere, who didn't have a very good collegiate production profile, in Jonathan Mingo. So the fact that you're bringing in a young quarterback with untrue or unproven weapons currently on this Carolina offense in the passing game, outside of one guy who absolutely eats over the middle of the field and is the classic cliche word, deceptively fast, just because he's a white wide receiver, basically. He's a guy that has been a producer in the red zone, underneath, over the middle, with slant routes specifically for a guy like Kirk Cousins. So having a guy like Bryce Young in Carolina to throw him the ball, it's laughable, as I said, that he is currently ADP 64 overall at the wide receiver position, behind a guy like Michael Gallup, who is looking like he's going to be probably the 3rd or 4th option on that Dallas team from a passing standpoint. It's pretty wild, but that's my guy. What's your take on Thielen?
I mean, I like Thielen. I would have to be in win now mode, 100% win now mode, because you can get him for free. Basically, if you haven't done your rookie draft, you can get him for next to nothing. And again, I think there's this misconception in the dynasty and fantasy space that you have to win pretty. It's like, I play in a lot of leagues. I'm in a high stakes league where we have to start 12. We have to start 2 quarterbacks, well, it's super flex, so you don't have to quote unquote start 2 quarterbacks, but you're going to start 2 quarterbacks and then 2 tight ends. It's tight end premium, and you must start 2. That leaves 8 other positions, 1 running back, 1 wide receiver, and then 6 flexes. There's going to be weeks where on a contender, you could use Adam Thielen, and that is a big miss. So, yeah, I mean, am I rushing to go get him? No. Is he going to have value? Yes. Is it probably the last year you're ever going to use him? Yes. Is he going to be a bridge guy to like a Johnny Mingo or a Terrace Marshall? Yes. Now, I know as a Bears fan, you're probably hoping that Carolina is going to be really, really bad next year because the Bears have their first, but yeah, I could see there are leagues where you would have Adam Thielen as a starter, but and win now, yeah. I mean, what would you give up, like a 4th? You think you get him for a 4th?
Yeah, easily. The stigma of him being 33 years old is all that you have to basically sell, which you're not the one selling it. The guy who owns Adam Thielen already knows. Like Kevin Smick in the comments said, he's an owner. He's been trying to sell him all offseason. No takers. Can't do it, but he's going to start games. He's going to get touchdowns for Carolina, and if they score, he's probably going to be involved in a large chunk of those scoring plays. Plus, He is 33. Yes, I know it's a win now game, but we always have this mindset where we think Dynasty is a 5-year game. It's honestly not. It's a 2 to 3 year window typically for anyone, as you know, even shorter a lot of times for those winning windows. So a guy that has 25 million in dead cap over the next 2 years, making him pretty close to uncuttable. I don't want to call anyone uncuttable at this point, but for a team that's definitely going to be able to use him, even if they draft a high-end wide receiver or trade for one next offseason in Carolina, it's a guy that at wide receiver 64 is nothing but value for me.
Yeah, that's a hit. I also have the FF Mad Scientist, Dennis. He's in the chat. And he's like, he got Thielen in the 29th round out of the 30-round startup last week. And it's, again, that's a starter. This is what we're looking for. We're looking for ADP hits. Now, I went with more of the bigger name. And I think he's not my flag plant guy because we're doing Dynasty Week here at Player Profiler. We're going to be doing Dynasty starting the 13th through the 19th. And it's going to be all Dynasty all the time. We're going to do a lot of different Dynasty shows. We're all going to have our flag plant guy. Now, this guy was probably pretty close, but in fairness, I've probably got to give Theo or the Podfather himself the right to go get Rachaad White because he is one of my guys. I think he's a stone cold hit at his quote unquote free public ADP. Now, Fantasy Pros has him as their 60th player overall, their RB 19 off the board in a 1 QB league. Now, Player Profiler has him a much more realistic 34th overall and their RB 13. For me personally, he's in that RB 13 to 15 range. And here's why. Last year, we had our boy Fat Lenny. Fat Lenny was there. He was the RB 12 on the season. And then you have our man, Rachaad White. He was the RB 36 last year on the season. And Fat Lenny, he's no longer in town. And these two combined scored 365 PPR points. Now, I'm not new here, guys. I know that Fat Lenny is gone, and I know that Rachaad White is not getting all 365 of those points. It's true. But if he gets 70%, that's 255 points. That would have made him last year's RB6. Big season in inbound. And you may say to yourself, but Tom Brady retired. I know. I saw him on YouTube with Mr. Beast throwing footballs at drones of all things. But that's cool because you know what? Baker Mayfield last year was the number one QB in terms of percentage of targets checked down to the running back. 11.6% of Baker Mayfield's checkdowns, of his passing attempts last year were checkdowns to the running back. It's literally Rachaad White, the artist formerly known as Keyshawn Vaughn, a guy that I really like in Sean Tucker. And then I believe they brought in Chase Edmonds. Does anyone in that running back room make you feel like that they're going to get in the way of a Rachaad White breakout? And here's the thing. Tampa's going to be bad in playing from behind. Check down. Garbage points are points, gang. That helps you win. So for me, I think Rachaad White is a smash at 60th overall per Fantasy Pro. So if you're doing a startup or you're starting a startup, now is a great time during Dynasty Week to try to acquire Rachaad White before me or Matt Kelly or Theo or someone from Player Profiler really blows his stock out of the water because he's only going to get more expensive as the drumbeat goes on. So, Dally, what do you think about Rachaad White? And then who's your second hit?
Yeah, for me, I'm not a Rachaad White guy, so we're going to butt heads a little bit on this one, which makes for good content. As everyone knows, you don't want to hear us, just mouthing over the same words for an hour. But when it comes to Rachaad White, yes, I am not going to be the first person to ever tell you to overhype a player that went undrafted in Sean Tucker. I just know what I've seen with both Rachaad White in a Tampa Bay uniform and what I've seen specifically with just the organizational structure, how it is kind of right now, what we're dealing with Tampa Bay and how they run the ball. So they've split carries. They did it with Fournette. They did it with White. They did it basically all the way back to almost Doug Martin. They've been splitting the carries in Tampa Bay. And so it's one of those things where Rachaad White, he could get a lion's share of the carries, but all he showed last year, along with Leonard Fournette, is an inability to be efficient with the touches that he is getting. And people talk about only yards per carry, typically from a from an analytic metric side of things. But the guys over at Establish the Run actually have talked about this. Adam Leviton and Evan Silver both about the efficiency that Rachaad White showed last year being worse than Leonard Fournette's, which if you're calling Fat Lenny slow and can't break tackles and can't be productive, what are we calling Rachaad White is all I have to say with him specifically. ADP, I think it's right around that 20 range is right for him. As long as for personal ranks, you don't have a big disparity between some of those middle tier guys and like an Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon, J.K. Dobbins, just because of how much value you're still going to get from name cachet while they're producing this year, even if you need to move off of them or need to go for the titles, their production levels, I think I'm okay with having White at that ADP. I just wouldn't be creeping him up above 15. I'd feel kind of icky doing it, but that's just where I'm at on him. Is that fair?
No, I mean, it's 100%. And I hope Sean Tucker does get a chance to show what he could do. He was a guy that when we were doing our rookie content, he was someone that I really liked. I wanted him to get healthy in time to do the combine. I wanted him to get healthy in time for the NFL draft. I really wanted him, but I feel like he's a guy that I feel like he's safe. You know, these fringe rookie running backs like a Sean Tucker, he's safe. They're not going to bring in a veteran in the Tampa Bay because they're quiet quitting. I mean, they're putting players on the field, but they're not trying to win games. They want a shot at Caleb Williams. They want a shot at Drake May or whoever the second or third QB is in this draft. So for me, yeah, I like Sean Tucker, but he's a guy that if I think he can get 60 to 70% of those points, he's going to be an RB1, and I'm going to be real stoked. Dallas, who's your second guy? Who's your second ADP hit that you think is a steal and you're going to take a little early in dynasty startups?
Yeah, this is actually in the chats being talked about right now. It's a guy in Isiah Pacheco for me in Kansas City. We were hearing all offseason, both from kind of people kind of loosely connected with the team, as well as the fantasy space just drumming it that KC was going to draft another running back, that we were going to get competition for Isiah Pacheco, that it was going to be different than last year, but we didn't get it. And right now, that guy in PPR scoring is going as running back 26 at 74 overall. He's with the likes of guys that are in true committee backfields where you're having arguments with how many touches can you rest assured that this player is going to get on a given week. Is he going to get double digits? So when you're in that range with a guy who's a starter who, yes, they brought back a guy in Jerick McKinnon who I love. I'm from Kansas City, for those of you that don't know, and I watch a lot of Chiefs. But the fact that people are kind of looking for ways to hype him out of the job right now by trying to hype up Deneric Prince, who, yes, was efficient in college, but didn't look very good, and then also went undrafted. It just feels ugly, just kind of how the other one was. And this is a young player where, guess what? If he just does pretty much the same efficiency he had last year on roughly the same touches and stays healthy all year, you're going to be outperforming running back 26. I can tell you that. So it's just a very cheap running back that's young, that's kind of hard to acquire in dynasty space this year. So,
well, how the table turns. I am off of Isiah Pacheco.
Here we go.
I see why his ADP is a little bit lower. 13 of his 183 touches last year were receptions. That's 7% of his total workload came on receptions, and Patrick Mahomes checks the ball down on a percentage basis less than Lamar Jackson. To your point, they brought back Jerick McKinnon. The carcass of Clyde Edwards-Helaire is still there. To me, he feels like Elijah Mitchell from last year. You know, we had Elijah Mitchell last year. We were very excited. It was a great offense in San Francisco, and he was going to come in. And you know what? He did good. Now, in fairness to Pacheco, he does not have the injury issues that Mitchell does.
Yeah, or Christian McCaffrey in the backfield.
But you know what? The summer's not over. Zeke's still out there. I wouldn't be too worried about Zeke. We mentioned Lombardi Lenny. I'll call him less fat now. So I didn't mention Lombardi Lenny. Kareem Hunt. I still think there's a world where they may do a Kareem Hunt reunion in Kansas. I know, it was left a sour taste in their mouth, but I wanted to like Pacheco until I realized that he's just not going to get a lot of PPR volume. So what is he? He's a between the tackles grinder that's not going to score a bunch unless, he just happens to have that LeGarrette Blount falls in the end zone a bunch season. I don't see it. 7th round draft capital. So while I wanted to, when I started doing the research for a bonus show I did on the Dynasty WarZone podcast channel that dropped last Friday, that I started doing the research and I was like, holy shit, that's not much passing work. So I would rather have a guy who catches more passes. That's kind of why I'm into Rachaad White over Isiah Pacheco. But is that fair? Is that a fair counterpoint?
Yeah, fair counter, totally. But that's just my thing. I think I get 100% what you're saying for why you're out on him. But being out on him based off of his current ADP where you can get him, I probably don't agree with. Just because when you get to running back 26, I don't need my running back 26 in my ranks to get me 18 rushing touchdowns. If he gets 9 to 10, cool. And that's not out of the realm of possibilities. It's probably going to happen that he gets around 8 to 9 touchdowns this year in the ground. I don't care about the passing work at that point, just because it's a guy that I'm going to get 10 points a week from. And if I get that from a flex spot, which I would be drafting him as, you can't be that upset about it,
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm totally with you. I think you're hoping for Miles Sanders' season last year, where he finishes as the RB10 and he gets, he falls in the end zone 10 times. Well, hey, speaking of good offenses and falls in the end zone a bunch, and I think he's going to have a great year, is Joe Mixon. 71st overall per Fantasy Pros ADP. He's their RB23 off the board in a 1 QB. Player Profiler, a very similar RB24 off the board. But here's my thing. Joe Mixon's only 26 years old. He'll be turning 27 as the season gets going. And I know he's got his off the field issues. I know I'm buying a guy that could get suspended next year. Although we're still waiting for Alvin Kamara, who literally, for lack of a better term, swarmed a guy with his boys and, beat the crap out of a guy. And he's still not suspended. And Joe Mixon has just alleged, again, it's alleged, has done something. So that's why I was buying him last year. If you know anything about the Cincinnati Bengals and their ownership group, they are notoriously cheap. They would squeeze an orange to get every last bit of juice out of it. And they're not going to cut Joe Mixon knowing they have paid him guaranteed money on the back end. So I love Joe Mixon this year. Samaje Perine's in Denver as the RB23. So he will be essentially your RB2 in a startup. And I think even if he hits the free agent market next year, I think there'll be a little bit of a market for him. Dallas, real quick. So what are your thoughts on Joe Mixon? And give us that 90-second elevator speech on what the 2024 running back class looks like. Because I will say this, the free agent running back class is going to be huge. So a big tidal wave, a big tsunami of ADP fluctuation coming. So if I can get a guy who has like top 3 overall at the running back position, I believe that's how good Mixon can be this year. How do you feel about Mixon? And then what's the 24 rookie class coming up look like?
Yeah, Mixon is a good bet for this year. You can only hope that he can keep at bay basically the RB2 this year and maybe get a higher rushing total workload. He did only play in 14 games last year. So yes, I know his end of season stats may not look super good. He was decently efficient on the ground and he ended up seeing 75 targets last year, which was pretty nuts. The offense is pretty much going to be status quo from what we saw last year. There's no big changes that really happened other than hopefully improving the offensive line, which we've been hoping for 4 years, basically, for Joe Burrow. But you look at Mixon, all the dominoes are still perfect for him to just slide right in there, do the top 12 season that we need him to be, and keep the value. He is on the younger side of that RB class that he came out with, which is nice. But I will say, when you're looking at the 2024 class, it could be very, very nice next year. There are some physical freaks coming in this upcoming class when it comes to the size of backs. There's 2 guys that are roughly in that A.J. Dillon size that might be a little bit more athletic even than A.J. Dillon was coming out. So it's pretty interesting. Plus, you have guys that people were just through the roof on, like Blake Corum, who's coming back from an injury, who's going to be now in this upcoming 24 class. So there's a lot of name hype going on, a lot of guys that should have really good seasons, and you're hoping kind of for the resurgence. a healthy resurgence of a lot of people's top back from a skill standpoint in Trevion Henderson out of Ohio State. He's just dealt with the injury bug incessantly over the last 2 years, and it's really hampered his long-term outlook. But I mean, for me, I'm extremely excited to see what Trey Benson does down at Florida State next year. You have Donovan Edwards finally getting kind of what you hope is a 50-50 split with a guy like Blake Corum, and then some of the guys lower down the list, like a Devin Neal, who might be a sleeper in this upcoming class. So it is looking pretty good. I don't know if I would be moving a mid to early first for Mixon based off of what I'm seeing, but it is young, and if I'm looking to contend, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I love Joe Mixon, but you're drunker than a hoot owl if you're out there moving any kind of a first for Joe Mixon.
Yeah.
I mean, but I will say this is really about ADP with draft position in a startup. And I'm looking at Joe Mixon at 23 at Fantasy Pros, 24 at Player Profiler. And I would much rather invest in Joe Mixon knowing that I might get 1 year. I might get 1 year, but if I'm in a win now build, if I'm trying to win the money in year one, I'd rather take Joe Mixon at 24 than I would Ramondre Stevenson at 14 or Javonte Williams at 16 or Dameon Pierce at 18. Gang, there is a list of about 10, and I did this with the Podfather 2 weeks ago on Mind to Mansion. I listed literally about 10 running backs that are all going to be free agents, plus the rookie class Dallas is talking about. If you're investing heavily in doing major builds around the running back position, you're going to have headaches as soon as next year. But even though it's not an official commercial break, I do want to throw out a quick word for the guys at Trophy Smack. Trophy Smack makes the coolest, best trophies in the fantasy and dynasty space. So if you're doing a dynasty startup or you're an existing dynasty gamer, man, do me a solid. Maybe your league doesn't have a trophy. Go over to trophysmack.com/underworld and check it out. If you use anything at the promo, the checkout box, if your subtotal is $100, not $99.99, but $100, and you use promo code Underworld, you can get a stunner ring or a bling ring with your purchase over $100. That's before tax. That's before shipping. It's the subtotal $100. They have draft kits. They've got trophies. They got these new things called wall smacks. You can, like me, I should probably convert a picture of my son playing baseball and maybe replace Bo Jackson one day. But just go over to trophysmack.com/underworld. The /underworld is important because it told them we sent you. Even if you don't buy anything, maybe you're just looking, helps us out tremendously. So Dallas, we've had the fun part. We've done the easy part. We've done the hits. Where are the consensus? And we're using consensus and quotation marks, the same way we use the world famous in quotations draft kit in quotation marks. Who is your first miss? Like you see the ADP and you're like, there's no way in hell I'm drafting this player there.
Yeah, this one's pretty easy. This is the part of the show where, as the rookie guy, I tell everyone for the next 2 times we talk about players to just maybe calm down on the rookie hype a little bit. It's a guy that I wasn't super sold on during the draft process, didn't like his landing spot, really just based off of what we were seeing, and definitely didn't like his actual NFL ADP, and that's Jahmyr Gibbs. Gibbs currently right now is in that mix of an ADP of a guy like a Kenneth Walker, who we saw in the NFL absolutely destroy at a much larger size, a much more athletic back. He's in that realm of a guy that you love, Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones, who's been perennially a top 12 running back in this class. And so when I'm looking at a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, it just kind of comes to his minimum weekly touch potential is what I'm looking at when I'm looking at Gibbs. So you're seeing Monty brought in on a 3-year contract, which isn't gangbuster money or anything like that, but just the fact of they just paid a running back to be the in-between runners. So you basically have to rely exclusively on the passing work, which during the early part of the season, he may see a large portion of, but eventually Jameson Williams is either coming back, or if he doesn't come back, his entire dynasty roster ship is going down the tubes, but that's the story for a different day. So when you're looking at just the target upside, it's capped after week 6 with Williams' return. And the fact that in ADP right now, he's ahead of the likes of Najee Harris, Josh Jacobs, Nick Chubb, J.K. Dobbins even, and Ramondre Stevenson, who's a dynasty heart child to a lot of people, is pretty wild to me. especially when he didn't come in with the same kind of pedigree and lull that Bijan Robinson had. He was the 1B in the class, definitely. And the fact that he's going into a very sustainable running back group that likes to split touches and doesn't really give a ceiling workload to any guy under Dan Campbell, it's just a lot for me to chew on that he's a top 15 running back. It's kind of the exact situation that was happening last year with James Cook, specifically going to a Buffalo team just because Josh Allen was there. And James Cook now, for some reason, is ranked behind Gibbs, even though this is again coming from a James Cook hater. Cook has a better outlook most likely this year than a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs does. So that's just me.
Well, so for me, first of all, I don't always get the show sheet back before we hit the go live button. Now, in fairness, so some of you may be reading the YouTube show title that says with John Sheps. John had a family emergency, Dallas being my buddy, being my pal, and doing good stuff for us over the Dynasty WarZone. He jumped on at the last minute, but I should have maybe proofread his show sheet because he said the name Jahmyr Gibbs as being overdrafted. And here's what I got.
Emotional damage.
You've damaged me, Dallas. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is a smash for Dynasty. I absolutely love Gibbs, and I see the outlook in 23, but I really like Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator. I think that we might be jaded a little bit by the usage pattern of DeAndre Swift. My thought on this is I think that was more of a DeAndre Swift issue than a Jahmyr Gibbs issue. You know, in Detroit, they've got weapons. I mean, Amon-Ra, the sun god, he is awesome. I liked him from the get-go. I didn't like him enough that I can put him as one of my guys, but I really liked Amon-Ra. I like Sam Laporta. But you mentioned Jameson Williams and then Marvin Jones, Josh Reynolds. I think Josh Reynolds may have been one of the guys suspended in the gambling thing. So I love you. I appreciate you jumping on to bail me out and not making this a solo show. But here's all I'm going to say on Jahmyr Gibbs.
But the cream will rise to the top. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the cream will rise to the top. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is good. But can I give you one? Can I give you one? And I really want your thoughts. Because, again, we've been using Fantasy Pros, and we appreciate them being free. But my first guy, but their rankings, it's a lot like the missionary position. I'll be real honest with you. It gets the job done, but it's not what I'm here for. You know, I'm not here for this. And I they lost me when they had Kyle Pitts as high as they had Kyle Pitts. They had Kyle Pitts as the 17th player overall. This is not in tight end premium. 17th overall. He is their tight end one. Now, Player Profiler has him a much more realistic 49 overall and the tight end 3 overall. Now, I know this is a family program, but I'm going to say what I'm going to say because this is what I thought. So I pulled this up and I'm reading through. I'm reading through these, and this one jumped off the page like in this stark reality. And I said to myself, what in the French fried titty fuck are we doing here? How the hell can you have Kyle Pitts at 17 overall? That is a disservice. I mean, he's not done anything. He's not added anything that would make his value go up. It just feels like this is the one thing that bummed me out. That putting him at the tight end one, it felt like obligation than out of obviousness that he's the tight end one. You know, if you'd have put Mark Andrews at number 1 over Kelsey, I'm fine with that. You know, if you'd have put Kelsey number 1, I'm fine with that. But putting him being Kyle Pitts at tight end 1 overall, to me, is a disservice to people who play this game. This one right here really felt like blasphemy. For me, he's my tight end 5 in a startup. I mean, again, Arthur Smith, the slow pace of the offense, the slow pace of the conference, just nothing about this screams dynasty or fantasy goodness, and they clearly want to run the ball. So, Dallas, I lost my mind. I got emotional damage from you adding Gibbs. How do you feel about me adding Kyle Pitts, and what are your thoughts on Kyle Pitts?
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. It's going to be a hotly tumultuous and contested statement in the dynasty space, because if you have Kyle Pitts, you have to be on him. You have to do it for your own psyche and for how much you paid for him, most likely. I know me and you are both in the boat of cut your losses when you see that they're losses, but that's not really what a lot of people do, and I get that. I would still just say to you that if people are anti Desmond Ridder or anti-Marcus Mariota from last year, then you also have to hope that the dying body of Matt Ryan showing you 1,000-yard season means that even an average quarterback realistically should give you a pretty good season from Kyle Pitts. I will also say that technically from a receptions and receiving touchdown standpoint, in, I believe it is 6 less games over the first 2 years, Kyle Pitts has more receptions and receiving yards than TJ Hawkinson had in his first 2 years with Detroit. So I would just say, we know tight ends take a little bit. If you want to get out now, you can, because you're probably going to get okay value, but it's a very volatile asset that has, for stock layman's terms, the ability to fluctuate quite a bit in peaks and valleys in the next couple of months. So you got some cojones if you hold on and cojones if you let go. That would be what I say.
Let me hit you with a financial term that I covered a while back on the game plan when I was a guest with Matty Kiwoom. His show lands on Saturdays. It's the greater fool theory. That means you can buy anything. It's a finance term for a stock or a property or any kind of investment. And the greater fool theory states that you can buy any item, a fantasy football player in Dynasty or a piece of property, as long as you think a greater fool will come along and pay what you paid for it or more. If I have Kyle Pitts on any of my rosters, I'm looking for the greater fool. If you can get someone who's really, really, really convinced that Kyle Pitts is the tight end one, cool, give me Mark Andrews and any plus that I can get, because I would rather have Mark Andrews. I would rather have TJ Hawkinson. I'm a little concerned about what the target mix looks like now that they've added Jordan Addison, but I'm not that worried. You know why? Kirk Cousins threw the ball 650 times last year. Those can't all go to Justin Jefferson. I know it sounds odd to say that, but it's true. Some of that 650 will go to TJ Hawkinson. So I'm not a Kyle Pitts guy. I think that was way too high. And So that's my guy, Kyle Pitts, but I have one more for you, and I know you do too, Dallas. Who's your other guy that you think his ADP is a miss?
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy right around that same range as a Christian Watson that was actually brought up a couple times in comparison in the chat. So it's funny, they were kind of some ESP reading my mind a little bit. And that's the big wide receiver that I had him just nudging out from this year's class in Quentin Johnston. And it's due to the fact of target volume most likely not being there. And just from a talent standpoint, I get the whole age argument. You get in on wide receivers young when you can, but from a functionality standpoint of winning games at some point in your dynasty leagues over the next 2 years specifically, give me Chris Godwin every day of the week. Give me Deontay Johnson every day of the week. Give me, for this year, Marquise Brown. For this year, probably Ayuk. You look for all of the George Pickens stands out there from last year that think that he's going to take a step up with Kenny Pickett. You have that outlook. You have Treylon Burks, who's looking at probably 120 targets easily this year, as long as Nuke doesn't sign. Again, knock on wood. And the aforementioned Jordan Addison. Just all of those guys immediately following him in ADP just doesn't really make sense. When you're looking just specifically at the Addison situation, in both ADP and positional ranks being behind him in this class right now, it doesn't really make sense from an ADP standpoint, at least for me. And the fact that he's ahead of, in obviously their dynasty ranks, but by quite a considerable amount ahead of Mike Williams and Keenan Allen in the ranks, that one doesn't make sense to me either. So I'm just concerned.
Well, I was never a Quentin Johnston guy. I look at the tape and I know he's a big athlete. I love that the Podfather calls him less fast Rachaad Perriman. I think that's funny, but I don't get the love for him. Like I'm not necessarily taking the back of the baseball card stats for Quentin Johnston, with the 40 and the burst. I get that, but I watch a guy on tape that should have dominated that should have dominated in the Big 12 with a quarterback. And I know Max Duggan. Is it Duggan or Duggan?
I thought it was Duggan personally, but I've heard it.
I mean, Hacksaw Jim Duggan. I don't know, but I mean, Duggan was at least serviceable. Okay, was at least serviceable and got him to the Natty, and he had less productive numbers like on the back of the sports card. He had less production in the Big 12 than Marvin Mims, who lost Spencer Rattler, who lost Caleb Williams, who had arguably the worst quarterback of his career there in Oklahoma, and he still managed to produce as a much smaller man. I just have never gotten Quentin Johnston. I'm looking at Fantasy Pros ADP. You know, he's going ahead of Jamison Williams. I don't necessarily hate that. I do not like Kenny Pickett, but I would rather have not Kenny. I do like Kenny Pickett. I don't like George Pickens, the two picks. I don't like George Pickett. Do like Kenny Pickens. He's kind of a low-key giving me Daniel Jones vibes. But I would rather have Pickens battling for targets with Freiermuth and Deontay Johnson than I would Quentin Johnston fighting for targets with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. I agree, man. I think that's too high. How close is Zay Flowers for him? Did the Baltimore landing spot just nuke Flowers for you?
Yeah, I mean, I would have liked it a lot more, most likely, if they hadn't brought in OBJ as well. I know the injury bug loves that man, specifically with soft tissue issues, but he's going to get a large amount of the targets. You would hope that Rashad Bateman can stay healthy. That's another question mark. So yeah, if the room clears out like it has a tendency to do over the last 3 years and you're left with nothing but a Zay Flowers, you can feel pretty optimistic. But I like, from a skill set standpoint and a talent standpoint, those two guys quite a bit more than Zay Flowers. And again, guys, can't stress this enough. I'm the rookie guy, so this is like all I do all the time. I just try not to get blinders and take lock on some of these guys in the situation you do have to pay attention to. You're not looking at an AJ Brown situation where the guy is 6'2", was amazing in college and is playing bully ball and is looking at 100 targets his first year. So it's just going to be interesting, especially when you look at the passing volume outside of Mark Andrews. I feel like that's the conversation we have every single year. I just can't be super high on Zay year one until this room clears out even more. So.
No, I agree. And I like Flowers. I think Flowers is going to be a guy I'm looking to purchase a bunch of as soon as week 7, week 8. I think people will be like, yeah, this is not going to be a very good offense. You know, Odell Beckham's going to be there. Bateman will be back. Andrews will be involved. And I think, as rookies tend to do, they tend to get off to a slower start. And he's a guy that I'll be looking to add because we know Odell Beckham won't be there next year. The big Lamar extension kicks in. Andrew's still making good money. They're always going to invest in the defensive side of the ball. So I like Flowers quite a bit. I do not like Quentin Johnston hardly at all. Well, I am going to get Dallas out of here, but I do want to take care of just a little bit of stuff here at the end. First of all, I want to thank all the guys in the group chat: Commie John, PJ Kennedy, Senior Football, Harry Snowman, and then our producer Kevin in there, keeping everybody in there as well. Now, PJ asked earlier, where do we get this link to Dally's merch? It's real simple. Go to his Twitter @SaladGalore. The link to his merch is pinned right there in his Twitter bio. So you just go right there, 2 taps. You tap Twitter, you find Dally, you tap the link, it'll take you right to it. So Dally, man, I just call you Dallas. I didn't know Dally was like a nickname.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, Dallas is my name. It's just Dally is what typically family calls me, or very close friends. So that's why you got it in there. And yeah, if you literally just go to Google, Bing, your local favorite search bar, and type in Dally's merch, you'll find it pretty much as the top link, because I'm pretty sure I'm the only one out there that used the term Dally in this, country. So,
well, Dally is a good guy, and please follow him @SaladGalore. And I always bring this up: two YouTube channels, 2 podcast channels. Of course, we're streaming live on Player Profiler. That's been our new home for the Dynasty WarZone, what we call the mothership, the main show, as well as the podcast. But we have our own YouTube channel where guys like Dallas, we have our buddies Chad, Jesse, and Mike. They do a show called the Dynasty War Games, We're going to have some redraft content. So 2 channels. And if you want to get more of Dallas, he's a super sharp guy. He typically, a little busy with work right now, he typically drops a show on Mondays called the Rookie Rundown. Right now he's talking about rookie ADP, landing spots, concerns, things like that. That's in the feed, and he'll have some stuff coming up. Speaking of stuff coming up, I'll get you out of here. Kiss the ring. So tomorrow night, we're going to do the mulligan with John McGlynn from the Commission Evaluation Podcast. And then in a couple of weeks, we're going to have John Sheps. John Sheps is going to come on. He does a league called the Frankenstank League. It's a big multi-tiered. I was in it last year. You can get like cards. You can steal players. It's pretty cool. So if you're looking for something to spice up your fantasy league with some commissioning tips, please be sure to check out the Kiss the Ring podcast and the Dynasty WarZone everywhere we go. Well, listen, we're going to get out of here. We're going to go to a little overtime behind the scenes with Dally. We're going to get some rookie ADP questions answered. But again, thank you to everyone in the chat. Thank you so much for the support. And we'll be back here next week. It will be Jerry. Jerry's back from vacation, and we'll be jumping into some more Dynasty goodness. Again, Dynasty Week is this week, starting the 13th. Flag Plant Week. You're going to hear more from me. You're going to hear more from everybody. Billy Muzio, Theo, the Podfather, Matty Kiwoom. Everybody's going to have a Flag Plant guy. You don't want to miss it. Player Profiler YouTube channel. Thanks for tuning in. Dallas, we have some overtime. Let's go get it.